Welcome to Drinking on the Edge. I'm your host, David Fuhrer, and joining me here, as always, is my producer and RFR's founder, Matty Rosenberg, and Jen Mahmood? Mahmood, thanks for the correct pronunciation on that, who is the second in command here at Radio Free Rhinecliff. Joining us today in this episode it's a live stream, by the way. It's only our second live stream, and it will be podcasted as well. But joining us here are a couple of locals, the owner-proprietors of Branchwater Farms in Milan, Kevin Pike and Robin Touchet. Welcome to Drinking on the Edge.
Thank you, David. Hi.
Hi. I've had the pleasure of their company on a couple of past occasions, having visited Branchwater Farms to write about it for Distiller magazine. It was a great pleasure doing so, and visiting again a few weeks ago with a good buddy of mine, who's also appeared here on Drinking on the Edge, Carlo DeVito. Thank you, Carlo. And we're here tasting a full measure of what they produce at Branchwater Farms. We're going to give a little talk about the history and what brought them to it, and then down the nitty-gritty details about what it is that we're drinking here at Radio Free Rhinecliff. And as I'm talking, and as Kevin and Robin are talking, you might hear in the background, Matty is mixing up the medicine with a martini upon special request from an unnamed associate producer here in the studio. Robin, Kevin, would you please share with us a little bit about your personal and professional history that is relevant to Branchwater before you started Branchwater?
Should I start? I'll start.
Please.
So I've been in the wine business for 33 years now. I started outside of college. I went to school, did an English degree, which is very translatable in the world of work, and decided that I wanted to try to write fiction. And in the meantime, I had to make money. So my younger brother, who was still in school at the time, said, you should get a job in a wine shop. And so that's what I did. And I got a job then in 95. And that turned into a career. I moved to New York in January 2001 to take over as the director of national sales for Skrnik Wines, which was it was well known in New York and New Jersey as far as the distributorship was concerned, but they weren't well known in the United States as like a national importer at that time. They had just taken over 2 years before the Terry Thies portfolio. Terry Thies was better known than Skrnik was nationally because Terry was sold all over the country and Skrnik was not well known. I remember when I was interviewing for that job, I asked Terry, I was like, who are these Skrnik people? I had no idea who they really were until I got to New York to interview with them. And then I had that job for 14 years and then left to start my own company, Schatzi Wines, which is an wine import company that focuses on Northern European wine. So German, Austria, Switzerland. In France, we do like Beaujolais, Burgundy, Champagne, Loire. And then we do a little bit in Slovenia. And then in Italy, we do just autochthonous varieties in satellite regions. So very obscure, esoteric wines, but that's what I like to drink. And so that's what we were doing. But at the same time, Robin and I decided to buy the farm up here in Milan. And so we bought the farm in 2014.
But Robin also has a background relevant to yours as well. You also came from the wine business, correct?
Correct. Also an unemployable art history major background. Grew up in Virginia, went to school at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, and was very restless and wanted to see a little bit more of the world. One of my roommates convinced me to move out west to Oregon, and then I got into Italian wine. I worked at a kind of a specialty store out there and started making contacts with a lot of Italian winemakers, and kind of uprooted, moved to Italy, spent a decade there in and out of wine.
Where in Italy were you living?
I was in Verona.
Not bad. Kind of wine capital of Italy.
Kind of known for wine. Yeah, and then I really wanted to be back in the States. I wanted to be in wine, but I was in my 30s. Had already
and you couldn't find your Romeo there in Verona.
Oh, I did. That was what I was leaving from. Yeah, I stayed too long.
That was the bad Romeo. The good Romeo was yet to be found.
Right.
Yeah.
So I ended up in New York at the same company as Kevin, and that's how we met. We were kind of like lunch mates, making salads together and sharing kind of our backgrounds, and that's how we met and became friends, and then ultimately fell in love, obviously, and ended up here.
Wow. And you were working for a different company as well for some time. I knew you were working for another New York company. Yeah, another New York company we first had contact with.
Yeah, well, after Skrnik, I went to a small company called Bon Ami, And that was like my first kind of debut into sales in New York City. Had a really lovely job, kind of small scale.
You don't seem the cutthroat type.
No,
Okay.
I'm a really shitty sales rep.
That makes two of us. Right. Yeah, in and out quickly. So what then led you to consider a change of career that you both embarked upon? You said around about 2014.
14.
So what led up to that? What were your feelings? What were your thoughts in wanting to this major change within the greater adult beverage sphere? But still, it's a very different world that you chose to inhabit than the ones you previously did.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what brought you to that? How did that feel?
Well, I think it took us a while to get there.
Yeah.
So the impetus was, I think, well, for me at least, I was really burned out at the job at Skurnik because I was traveling a lot. I was away from my family, 2 small kids. I was eating too much, drinking too much. It was just not a very enjoyable existence, and I really wanted to change my job there, but there was no real room for me to grow in that company. And so I wanted to. I really. The times that I felt most alive doing that job was when I was in Europe visiting with the winemakers I was representing. And when you're selling other people's wines, that connection to the land becomes really important.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get closer to that mode of production. I was, for my entire wine career, I was selling what somebody else had made, and I wanted to make something on our own. So the original idea was to make cheese. So I did a stage, not really a stage. I did a couple days with a really good friend of mine in Austria, Johannes Hirsch from Hirsch Winery in the Comtel. He set me up with a cheese maker in the area that was doing. He had water buffalo and goats, and
Nice.
he made cheese from both of those things. They seem very different, of course they are, but
They produce milk.
they both produce milk, and so I got to spend several days with them making cheese, and I really enjoyed that. And I thought that was going to be my passion to do that. But then when we finally started thinking about it, we both realized that we don't know anything about selling
Practical
cheese.
experience with
You know, the welds that we have at the distillery are not sanitary welds. You don't need them for a distillery, but for a cheese making operation, any dairy operation, you need sanitary welds. It's like a completely different regulation with the
Worms.
FDA as opposed to just the Treasury Department with the TTB for alcohol.
And, and I would think in that making food products, you get a lot more of attention from government officials.
Exactly.
Yes.
Even pivoting from wine to spirits was like a huge, I'd say, learning curve. Is a huge learning curve.
How so? What are the points of reference that were the most difficult, the most challenging for you to grasp?
Well, for me, the sales side, obviously, like the application of spirits as opposed to like wine is like a primary product. You open a bottle, you pour a glass, you enjoy it. Spirits, there's a different context to what you do with them. You know, people want to know about cocktails. That's not really our background. We're not mixologists. We enjoy great cocktails, and also just like from an agricultural perspective, we wanted to do something, wanted to grow something, and we didn't have experience growing grain. And so
You set about growing grain at your Branchwater Farms, which, as you tell me, is a 100-acre property, but not all of that is dedicated to grain growing. Can you talk a little bit about how it is you came to choose the grains you grow? A little bit of background on how this may integrate with the history of Hudson Valley crop production. Yeah, how do you? Yeah.
So maybe I'll go back a little bit. Oh yeah, cheers. We have a martini here.
yes.
Cheers.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
So basically, how we got into the spirit side was that I talked to, when I was working at Skurnik for 20 years, I knew Hans Reisebauer. I met him in 1999. He was a master distiller in Austria, and we became friends. And I basically told him that, you know, once we pivoted away from cheese, I was like, I want to do spirits, and he said, I'll help you do that. And that was a huge assist for us. I mean, I can't
Huge.
imagine. We definitely are indebted to him. We couldn't have done it without him because he's the one. The 2 pots that we distill on now came from his distillery. He helped us. He helped me not only with the distilling side but the farming side. So he came at it from, you know, somebody from Upper Austria with a farm that he started his own distillery there. His father was just growing apples and fruits and grains and stuff like that, and he turned that into the distillery. It was never his father's business; it was his. So then, when we got to the farm, the first thing we did was we didn't know anything about farming. My mother grew up on a farm in Iowa. Robin's father grew up on a farm in Louisiana. And our parents kind of got away from farming. They're like, what do you, especially your dad, when we
He
started
thought we were absolutely
crazy.
out of our
Yeah,
heads.
when we told him we wanted to
Yeah.
do farming, he's like, what are you doing here?
Why? His father worked very hard to get my dad out of a life of poverty, which is what he had kind of known as farming.
Exactly. So then when we bought the farm, we hired contract farmers to do the actual work because we didn't know what we were doing. And then as we started reading more, I think a little bit more on my side, because the farming is the thing that really gives me probably the most pleasure, we started to realize that we wanted to go in an organic regenerative direction, and the contract farmers that we were using didn't understand. It wasn't in their wheelhouse. They were kind of traditional, conventional farmers and doing cover crops and doing different types of things. I could explain what I wanted them to do, but it wasn't really what they grew up doing. So also we contract farmed for 3 years, I think, and then we finally took it all over on ourselves for us to do it, and that meant investing in tractors and no-till drill seeders and roller crimpers and a whole bunch of equipment that we didn't originally have planned in the business plan to start a distillery. The original
and a tractor
idea
that I disagreed with.
Yeah.
An orchard tractor that was not. We didn't end up doing orchards, and so this tractor was like it was a death machine that I was so worried he was going to flip in this thing.
It's happened.
He sold it. He sold it.
So, I mean, to get back to your question about New York, Hudson Valley history and what we're growing, the original idea was to do orchards for cider and then apples for brandy.
Which is commonly enough associated with the Hudson Valley.
Exactly.
And then rye, of course, because rye is very, very, has a long history in the Hudson Valley. So that was the original plan. We ultimately abandoned the orchards for lots of reasons. One, because once we got into our own farming, the equipment you need for orchards and grain are totally different. The time that you need to be in the field for the apples is a completely different cycle than what you're doing with the grain.
But also the upfront investment of that we don't know if our kids are going to want to continue doing what we do, and an orchard is really something you invest in for future generations. And there are plenty of people doing it and doing it well. So we pivoted and said, why can't we support the people already doing it?
Right.
Buy fruit and then focus on growing grain. So we kind of have like a hybrid kind of solution to the distillery.
The other side was that we had a really good friend, Leif Sundstrom, who makes very good cider in the Hudson Valley, and he was then going to make his cider out of our facility. So we felt like, why do we need to do something that he's already doing? He has more experience than we do, and he's going to do a better job than we will. Let's focus on the distilling. And I think that freed us up to really go into the brandies, which I think is what, for me now, that's what I really enjoy the most is the fruit distillation and making eau de vie.
Oh, on that note, let's segue into talking about without pouring them quite yet, but let's talk about the fruits that you've chosen a little bit. There's a lot of stories here because as I'm familiar with, talking about what you've done with currants and all that, and the fellow who helped you out with that. So if you could talk a little bit about the orchard fruits and the non-orchard fruits as well that you're working with and how they've come to be.
So the first fruit we did was apples. So we basically, Leif, when he was buying his apples from the Finger Lakes, the Finger Lakes is a great resource for apples. I wish we could do more in the Hudson Valley, but the majority of the Hudson Valley fruit has been grafted over to pick your own dessert style apples and are not cider varieties anymore.
Right.
And the orchards that still have them use them on their own, so you can't really find them commercially available. The Finger Lakes is interesting because Mott's Applesauce, which is a very old company, has contracts and their recipe dates back to all these old cider varieties.
Oh.
So like Rhode Island Greening,
So they're locked up.
Golden Russet. No, but it's available.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Because people grow for that.
Because Mott's had these contracts, they're still grown up there, and they were never converted over to dessert apples. So that's how we're able to get varieties
and
like
they
Northern
don't buy it
Spy.
all.
So they're not long-term contracts, and even if
They are, but
they don't buy all of them. Got it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's enabled us to have access to these old heirloom cider varieties, which make better cider. They make better brandy, in our opinion. So that's how we started.
I have to just pick up on this.
Yeah.
This is Matt. For those listening, so you're saying that Mott's applesauce is made with some heirloom apples?
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's a very old recipe from the 1800s.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, this show.
Why not?
Who knew?
Things
Who
you
knew?
learn.
I would not have guessed that, to be honest.
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's 100% made.
No,
from
but
that,
they're-
but that recipe exists for a reason, and they still contract in the Finger Lakes for those apples. Yeah.
Well, it makes sense they purchase those apples which are less designed to go to the grocery store shelves and fetch a higher price in that capacity. So why are they going to pay for the top dollar for the
Right.
the Granny Smiths or the Red Delicious?
Correct. Yeah.
There you go.
So the first thing we did was bought apples. We committed to apples in July of 2020.
20.
And
And they
then
arrived in
October-
2020.
In
which
October
was also-
2020, but this was in the middle of the pandemic, so we were mostly done with the construction. We had an old dairy barn on the farm that we renovated into the distillery.
There were
But
obviously
the-
some delays with.
Yeah, the motors that were made in Germany that company was completely shut down. So we had the pots, but we didn't have the pumps or the fermentation tanks, so we couldn't make anything. We had the copper, but not the stainless steel, basically, or the
Yeah.
pumps to move
Yeah.
things around. So the only thing we could do really was turn the barn into a big
Cold storage facility.
walk-in cooler, and we kept them there for 3 months until we could finally process them, and we did them in January of 2021. So that was the
Yeah,
first thing
it was
we
the first
made
thing
was
we
apples.
made, but not the first thing that we released,
Right.
obviously. But yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then that takes care of your apple story. But there's a quick aside, and it's kind of jumping ahead. You did provide me some information, and I think a taste as well. So your regular bottling for apples is a 3-variety blend.
Correct.
But just to kind of tip the hat to this, you're going to be releasing a single variety one someday.
Correct. We did a so normally so the Calvados is made by
Calvados,
Which-
being
which is
a
the main-
French apple brandy. For
Correct.
those who don't know.
correct is made by grinding the apples, pressing the apples, making a cider, letting the cider oxidize, and then distilling the cider. Our process is a little bit different. We grind the apple so it looks like applesauce, and we pump that straight into the tank. We don't press it. We don't make a cider. We don't let it oxidize, and then we distill the fresh apples. So it's a different expression of an apple brandy than what you would find from Calvados. So we make ours with Northern Spy, Ben Davis, and Rhode Island Greening are the 3 varieties. But this year, Leif Sundstrom, who I mentioned before, that's a really good cider producer in the Hudson Valley, he had some golden russet that he made as a cider that was not oxidized. He made it in a reductive way, and we purchased that from him and then distilled that. So we now have like a golden russet eau de vie, which we like. We like it on its own, and we're going to release it as a
So not oaked.
clear,
Yeah.
not aged in oak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no mocking the.
And we're not done with apples. So we're now talking to Steve Sellen, who has South Hill Cider in the Finger Lakes. He was at the distillery today, and we're going to collaborate on another project, which is going to be his cider, which will be oxidized, and then we will do the distilling for him, and then we're going to age it in different ways. He's going to age some, we're going to age some, and we don't really know how the collaboration is totally going to work, but that's something else to do. Yeah. Because apples are New York, It's,
But also, I feel like, just to segue here, the fruit for me is really rewarding because of the collaborations that it requires. So, I mean, farming really becomes kind of an isolating, singular work sometimes. And Kevin can get a little bit in his own headspace. And I feel like the collaborations really open up the conversation, the possibilities, and it's been fruitful, so to speak.
Yeah.
But the fruit is, I think, it gives us that satisfaction as well.
And I think also because our background is in wine, we're interested in fruit, I think, a little bit more than grain, just because the fermentation is harder.
Yeah.
The distillation is harder. It's more complicated to make a fruit distillate than it is to make a grain one. Grain is really easy.
Well, on that note, why don't we back up a little bit, and if you could discuss a little bit about about your grains, what you've planted, how many acres, the process. Give us a little bit of history and what you're doing now with your various grains.
So,
And as you're doing that, I'm going to have Matt pour a small taste of your gin that comprised the previous martini, so we can have a straight taste of your gin, so they can understand what that's about.
Okay, so our gin is based on wheat that we grow on the farm. We've used a variety of different types of wheat. We've experimented with
Red Fife,
Turkey Red, Rouge de Bordeaux. We've experimented with one hybrid variety, everything's certified organic. We only plant certified organic grain.
So that applies to everything at Branchwater Farms does.
Yes, exactly.
It's good for people to know that.
And so the grain, so we use the wheat as the base for the gin. So
Which is pretty standard worldwide, I would think.
Yes.
But around
typically.
here, a lot of apple-based gins.
Yeah, though that's a particular
It's a Hudson Valley thing. Yeah.
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 Yeah, yeah.
Nope. Don't go on a tangent.
All right.
Stick with the grains.
So the gin is based on wheat, and then we distill that twice to get up to 85% alcohol. One thing that's unique about our distillery is everything's distilled above 160 proof. So that's not normal, but we distill everything above 160 proof. And then what we do with that is we make a lot of that wheat as I guess you would call it a whiskey, but it's clear because it's in stainless steel. And then when we get to about 2,000 liters of that, I like to have it all mixed so that you don't have a batch variation. So you do all those runs, keep that in a stainless steel tank, and then we pull that out, lower the ABV by adding water. Then we add the botanicals, which are certified organic, and then we macerate that for 24 hours. And then we do a third run in the pots with the botanicals in the pots. So the gin is distilled 3 times. Everything else at the farm is distilled twice. Yeah.
But the configuration of the farm and the fields, like
Yeah, please tell
yes.
us about about Kevin the farmer.
So we have one 14-acre field that has been used for wheat.
Well,
And
we
then-
were lucky enough to inherit a farm that hadn't been like conventionally farmed, so to speak. They hadn't used pesticides, or it was
Organic.
exactly. So it was really easy to transition into kind of the type of farming we wanted to do, and
Right.
then we didn't clear additional land for the grain.
Yeah, so
So
the
we have,
first
like,
couple years
25?
we cut the hay, traded the hay for manure, brought the manure on, composted the manure, spread the manure, did cover crops. We did everything from daikon radish to
Buckwheat.
red clover, buckwheat, Australian
Peas.
winter peas,
Yeah,
etc.
exactly.
Yeah, to add nitrogen to the soil, add biomass to the soil, add organic material to the soil, build the mycorrhizal layer. That we were working on all that for years before we planted the first crop. And then after that, 14 acres is wheat and 7 acres is rye.
And that's kind of where we're gonna probably keep things.
About 21 acres,
Correct.
most.
But
But a
this-
100-acre farm.
2 to 1 wheat to rye, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
But this year we decided to do something a little bit different, and we're going to put 6 acres every year into a fallow situation. So the rye field this year is now fallow. Robin runs all the animals at the farm, so part of the regenerative.
What animals are those?
Well, animals.
Yeah.
Chickens and ducks, and then we have 4 goats basically for entertainment. But yeah, we raise chickens and ducks for meat and eggs,
Yeah.
and that requires land. So
But our kind of rotational system is after we pull the grain off the field, we bring the animals into the field. They eat the grain that's fallen off the combine.
If
they leave.
If the turkeys don't get it first.
Right.
that's true.
And then we get the manure from them onto the field. And
Yeah.
so what our working idea right now is that 6 acres will be fallow every year as we move them around. Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds terrific. And you're growing just the one type of wheat then, or is there other ones you're working with?
Just the one. Right now we've settled on.
What are you doing right now? I don't
So
even know.
the wheat I planted this year came from Stonehouse Grains, which is a certified organic producer up in Columbia County.
Yeah.
It's secondhand to us, so it was sold from Stonehouse Grains to a really great regenerative farmer in near Ankrum called Hudson Valley Hops and Grains.
Stuart
He
Farr.
grew it out. Stuart Farr grew it out, and then we bought it from him and planted that.
Very cool.
And then the rye, we're using Danko, which is it's almost what everybody in New York uses is Danko rye. And Danko's great because it's a tall variety, and when you're doing organic farming and you're not doing pesticides, the weed pressure is the problem. So you need the grain head to be pretty high up, so that you're not, when you combine, you're not combining a bunch of weeds as you're trying to get the grain off. You're combining up higher, and then we need that also because then we want to cut the straw to use for the animals.
We use it for bedding.
Yeah.
Would it also follow then that the higher the higher grasses, grains, then more resistant to the humidity that is so pervasive here in the Hudson Valley?
They are, but
Yeah.
they're more prone to
The
lodging.
the thunderstorms.
So there's
Like-
there's more of a risk of the grain falling down.
Yeah. Got it.
And the
Okay.
last few years have been pretty treacherous. I mean, luckily we don't fully subsist from farming, but it's given us a window into people that do, like what it entails, and not just courage, but like the last few years have just really shown us what's possible in terms of expecting the unexpected. July is when we harvest our grain, and this year we had a very, very brief window, and luckily we contract the combining to Ken Migliarelli, and luckily the window fell perfectly, and we were able to get our wheat and grain and rye in. But 2 years ago we lost everything, and then there have been consecutive years where it's been weather challenges.
And this year planting was difficult. It rained every weekend
Yeah.
since Labor Day, as you know.
Yep.
So I got
Can't
stuck.
get
I got
heavy.
stuck in the field 6 times, just trying to get the fields ready for planting.
Yeah.
And it's, I think with climate change, this is going to be more of the norm.
Yeah, well, the past we thought was norm is no longer, and
Exactly.
all over the globe, as Kevin and you must know, because we both travel a lot for our work in that regard, in talking to farmers, be they grape farmers or otherwise. This is a fact of life everywhere in the globe. You
Yeah.
can read about it online and on newspapers, or you can experience it talking to the people themselves directly, such as yourselves. Yeah, Robin, you dropped the Migliarelli name, which is pretty well known in the area. It caused me to think, to what extent forging friendships, alliances, professional cohesion with other farmers in the Hudson Valley have helped you to find your way. Can you talk a little bit about that?
We couldn't have done what we do without our farmers, whether it's our neighbor Stephanie down the road who gives us horse manure, and I can't think of like a better example of community than this type of work. You absolutely have to rely on other people, and I think you're very independent minded, but I've been so impressed with the kind of connections that he's forged and reaching out to people that kind of have been doing things better, longer. And yeah, do you want to expand on that?
It's absolutely critical. You can't do it without the community. In my opinion, it's impossible. So, Robin did a stage up at Kinderhook Farm to learn some of the animal husbandry before she started the animals at our farm. We have a neighbor up the road from us, Marty and Mariah Clark. We borrow equipment from them to use. They help us with repairs on equipment.
Yeah, there's always a moment when you're just like you're stuck in the mud, or you
Help me get out of
you
this.
have a horrible rooster and you don't really know how to dispatch it, and you have to call on somebody who does know how to do those things, and we hope to at some point be in a position to do that for someone else.
Yeah.
Be in a position that we're knowledgeable about something enough that someone would ask us, like, hey, what would you do in this situation?
No
So,
doubt,
like
no,
a good
no doubt,
example-
given time that'll happen.
A good example of this was this year when we were harvesting. It was raining every day.
Yep.
And
I remember our texting each other about that. Yep.
exactly, you need the grain to be below 12% humidity to be stable for the winter and not to mold in the bin once you put it away. And it was when we harvested, it was at 17, 18. Some of it was at 20% humidity. So the prevailing wisdom, the old farmer wisdom, is that you turn the fans on in the bin to dry it out, but you only leave it on when it's not raining and when it's not humid outside. And I called Jay up at Stonehouse Grains. I was like, I don't know what to do. It's raining every day. The humidity's above 60% every day. What should I do? And he said, just leave the fans on and forget about it. He said, even if it's raining, leave the fans on. And that's counter to the old farmer's wisdom, but it was from his experience of doing it that helped me learn how to do that, and that saved our crop this year. So, I would say I totally agree with what Robin said. The community aspect of farming is what makes it possible.
Yeah. And shout out to Patricia here, proprietor of the Epicurean, and supporting the wholesale business that she started in supporting Hudson Valley
Exactly.
farmers and producers of the products that this valley gives. You touched earlier upon the fact that you have a retail outlet, but you are Milan's second grocery after the gas station. So you're selling a variety of New York products, I presume, in addition to the things you have on the farm. And people can purchase, obviously, Branchwater Farms distilled products there as well. Talk a little bit about the grocery. Just a quick thing about the grocery. I'm just curious.
So the grocery, it's a weekend farm store where basically our license allows us to sell New York State spirits, cider, beer, wine. So all the alcohol has to be from New York State, but we can also highlight other places for the groceries, the provisions. And it has just been kind of a wonderful way to investigate and learn, and it's just been a wonderful window into how bountiful the Hudson Valley and New York as a state are in general for agriculture, for just creativity. we're limited by the space. It's a very small farm store, but we have a dairy fridge, we have a meat freezer, we have dry goods, a couple of shelves. But if I could, I would fill, a warehouse with all the amazing things that we encounter. And
one thing that I got to interrupt, sorry, but one thing that really sets your provisional store apart from, I think, any other, let alone the gas station, is that you're a raised grocery, so people can get a view and above everything because you're above the distillery.
Yeah, and I actually get to talk about, like, when people come to buy duck eggs, I get to point out the window and say, those are the ducks that laid them. Or, you really do get a view of the fields. And when we taste people, we do it. It's a tasting room as well. And so when they're tasting the rye, I say, that's exactly where it was grown, right out that window.
So if people are looking to buy, bacon and eggs, you can taste them on your spirits. Makes them more pliable customers, I would think.
Right.
Hey,
you need a 12-pack of that.
That wasn't the original plan, but that's not a bad idea.
That's not a bad idea. Bloody Mary brunches and egg acquisition.
To have a hot plate nearby to cook something up. You can't sell that, of course.
No.
So going back to what brings us here, the distilling aspect, how receptive or not did you find your neighbors to this, yes, we're going to farm, but we're also going to be distilling things here? Because that brings along all sorts of concerns. There's the demon alcohol thing, then there's this safety and security about having a distillery nearby. It can always blow up. It doesn't happen often, but it can. How do you address these concerns, or did you have any with your neighbors?
Not the neighbors, but it wasn't legal. The distillery, Kevin had to lobby the town board, right?
Since Prohibition, alcohol production in the town of Milan was illegal. So it was
like Footloose, no dancing. It was like
exactly.
forbidden, the forbidden art of alcohol. But they were very thirsty to have it
When we
reinstated.
moved in, I wrote a letter to the town supervisor and said, this is what we're doing here. Mm-hmm. This is what we want to do. Would you consider changing the law for us or for the town, but to allow us to produce alcohol? And they did. So, I have to say, the town of Milan is extremely...
It's underrated.
Yeah, it's very underrated.
It's a great town.
It's a place where they're definitely willing to help make businesses work and start up there. And so I think also the neighbors were just thrilled that we weren't going to develop it. It was a 100-acre parcel. By the zoning law, we could have put, it's 5-acre zoning, so you could put, 20 houses on it, no problem. And I think the neighbors were just so thrilled that, we were going into it trying to figure out how do we just preserve the land and keep it in a farming community.
But also just the support, the spirits we do are somewhat esoteric. I think pear brandy, eau de vie, it's not on everybody's, the tips of their tongues. And our neighbors have been, basically our recipe for growth has been word of mouth. We don't have a PR firm. We don't have a budget for it. It's like we're focused on production, and we have a little rickety sign on the corner that's like distillery this way.
Yeah.
And our neighbors have been so gracious and so supportive and also so open-minded, and they're not inexpensive. Our pear brandy is a $60 bottle. It's a 375 milliliter.
It ain't cheap.
It's worth every penny, but the people that buy our spirits, I really enjoy having that person-to-person contact and knowing that when they leave, they're going to talk to someone else. And tonight I did an in-store tasting at Kingston Wine Company, and there was an Irishman who came in and he was telling me how he took his gin to Ireland, which is,
He took your gin to Ireland.
Took our gin.
Wow.
And it makes me proud because I met the person, and I know that person is bringing a part of what we're doing in our little corner of the globe somewhere else. And for me, that personal connection just means everything. And it's been our growth, and it's slow and hopefully growing, but it's organic. It's just like what we're doing. And I think our neighbors are the best.
Well, organic in both senses of the word. Let's drop back a little bit into your work in regenerative agriculture and what you do on site to keep things clean. Mm-hmm. Can you, yes, we know you're growing all your crops 100% organic, but what else do you do there that really kind of supports the sustainability issues in a bigger perspective?
The first thing I would say is something that we heard from a friend of ours who's also a mentor, Mimi Castile from Hopewell Vineyard out in Oregon. And she said, a proper regenerative farm never looks beautiful.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that defines our farm a little bit. It's always going to look a little bit messy.
It's a work in progress.
Because you're not spraying and trimming and doing the things that manicure a vineyard or a farm. What you're doing is you're really letting nature do what nature needs to do, and that's not always beautiful. It's beautiful in its own way, but it's not manicured like a golf
Right.
course is manicured. And you've been to lots of vineyards in California where it looks like a golf course, and that's not what we're after.
We're not a wedding venue, by the way.
No, it's prohibited by law in the town of Milan.
Oh,
Bears
that's good.
mentioning.
So here's what we do: we prepare the fields for planting in October, September, ideally September. We have not been able to get completely away from plowing. Okay, so plowing is still part of it. We tried to do no plowing for 3 years, and we lost the crop every year. So we can't. It's just too much competition for the grain with grasses and weeds and stuff.
You got to
like that.
survive.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
we gave up on that, but so what we do is we plow, and then we plant the winter crops. The winter crops comes up now; they're up now, and then we let them go through the winter when the freeze happens, and then we really need to have a pretty hard freeze still in March, which so far has been okay until last year. This year, 2023, was the first year where we didn't have a hard freeze in March. We need that hard freeze in March because in March we go onto the field again over the crops and we spread certified organic chicken manure for nitrogen and boron to help fix the nitrogen. And then we overseed with red clover. And the red clover forms kind of a carpet. Once it starts to grow, the thawing and the freezing of the soil sows the grain into the dirt.
So it takes away the work.
It takes away the work. We just spread it, and then it sows itself by the thawing and freezing. And that then makes a carpet which helps suppress, it shades out the weeds and helps suppress those weeds, but then red clover also is a great nitrogen fixture. So that's why we use that. This year we got the chicken manure on, but we didn't get the clover on because we didn't have another frozen day. And if the ground's not frozen, the tractor tires will tear up the crop that you already have in the ground. So, with global warming becoming more and more dramatic, I don't know if this system will work for us always, but that's the current system.
Yeah, it's also we really have to be like nimble and capable of change. Like I don't think there's a recipe anymore for, and maybe once upon a time there was, and seasons were reliable and people said this is what happened 10 years ago, this is what happened last year, this is what we're going to do this year. But we're really we're making a lot of it up as we go. And whatever's thrown at us, trying to adapt to that.
Right.
Wow.
And then we harvest the grains in July. After the harvest, we bring the animals onto the field. We get their manure. They eat the grain that's fallen. And then now that we've started this 6-acre fallow period, what we're going to do in the springtime is we're going to lightly disc that. And we're going to plant oats. Oats is really good for supporting the mycorrhizal fungi. And we're going to do Austrian winter peas, and we'll do daikon radish, red clover, and buckwheat, and sunflowers. I'm going to do sunflowers as well. So I'm a firm believer in the more of a mix, the more biodiversity you have in the field, the better it is, and that'll bring us a lot of biodiversity, a lot of biomass once it's rolled down, and we won't plow that under. Basically, what we'll do is we'll take a roller crimper and we'll roll all that down, kill it before it gets, like in the milky stage of the grain, you terminate it, and then it can't make the seed viable for germination to grow again. Okay. So you get all the benefit of the value of the organic material of that plant and the nitrogen fixing that it has without actually allowing the seed to be viable and making the whole field of, weeds.
A field
and
of-
if you contend with it again later.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Got it. Okay, so we've spoken a bit about your apples, and Matt has poured yet another gin-based cocktail as a version of Negroni using Chinar.
It's delicious.
Yes.
It's
Yours,
really good.
yours is, mine was. Once Matt gets back in the studio, we'll pour some more items. But meanwhile, can you speak a little bit about the other orchard and fruit ingredients that you're using to fashion your distillates?
Pear.
So pears, we're really fortunate to be working with Fix Brothers Orchard outside of Hudson.
Fifth
Bob-
generation.
Bob Fix is a 5th generation farmer in orchard fruit. They do apples, they do plums, cherries, and pears.
Yeah.
And we've done now
This year was obviously like devastating for a lot of the orchards.
Right. So the first year that we did pears was 2021, and we did 5 tons of Bartlett pears. and that's what we're tasting right now. And pear is really finicky. It's not like an apple. Apple, if the fermentation temperature gets above 17 degrees or so Celsius, it's not such a concern. With the pear, it really is a concern. So you've got to be very careful keeping the temperature of the fermentation tank pretty cool. And this is also distilled above 160 proof. So after the head cut, we stop distilling when the alcohol is at like 81.5. So the average alcohol is around 84-85% when we're done. So really high proof. And then it's aged for 6 months in stainless steel before bottling.
And you proof it down to
41.
41%.
Yeah.
Boy, this is Jenny. Have you tasted it? What do you
But
think?
so what's interesting is in 2022.
Get a first timer's perspective there.
It's delicious. I have to buy it for my dad. He loves pear.
It's the one that people respond to, I'd say, of the fruit
Wow.
brandies. It's the one that it's kind of like a little bit like a golden retriever. It's really friendly, and it tastes like a pear, right? Like the black currant is a little more head scratchy, and you got to spend some time with it. It's not
Indeed.
really like
Well,
accessible in the same
Indeed,
way.
we'll get to that shortly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the pear is the most accessible one to be sure.
So the pear, you pick a pear underripe.
Yes.
Because you can't pick them ripe. So they come to the farm green, and then we ripen them at the farm. So about 60% of the fermentation is when it's yellow with green still in the skin. We want you to taste the skin in the pear. That's very important. We want an orchard experience ultimately, not just a pear essence experience. And then 30% is when it's yellow turning almost a little bit red, and then 10% when it's really turning towards the
You're
ripe
giving all
end.
our secrets away, babe.
But the point is that the different sugars and esters are produced in the fruit as it ripens, and that translates into different aromas in the alcohol when the alcohol is produced, and that's how you get that complete pear expression, which is what we're looking for.
360-degree perspective. I get it.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely, that's absolutely delicious. This is maybe the 5th time I've enjoyed your pear eau de vie. Thank you. And for the people who are wondering, it's an easy thing to misconstrue. That is the difference between eau de vie and brandy. Mm-hmm. Most Americans think brandy is something that's going to be brown
And sweet.
And sweet, yeah.
and sweet potentially, and then and then you got the eau de vies, which is a funny word to begin with. Maybe most people don't understand it. Some do. But in your mind, what is the difference between the two, and how do you label yours?
It's a good question.
Technically, they're the same. So, in France it's called eau de vie, water of life. In Germany it's called schnapps. In the United States it's called brandy. Brandy is any distillate made from fruit. Point. That's all it is. In the United States, it has been bastardized into this sweet thing that is kind of cheap and what your grandma used to drink, but that's not the European kind of view of it. We know that we're swimming upstream with kind of
We
leading
love a
with the
challenge.
brandies. But it's the thing that we love the most because it's fruit based, and I think the expression of the fruit in alcohol is really, really fascinating in a way that grain can't really be for me. So yeah, that's why we're doing it, and that's why we're expanding it. So now, like from Fix Brothers now, Fix Brothers has become our kind of go-to orchard in the Hudson Valley. We have Bosque pear that we fermented and distilled from them that we'll release
And
in
also
the spring.
some from Montgomery Place.
And some from Montgomery Place Orchards. We did some Bosque from them as well. And we've committed to 5,000 pounds of English Morello cherries from
Fix Brothers.
Fix Brothers for next year. That we'll do our first cherry eau de vie.
Mm.
We've waited on the cherry because the cherry needs at least 12 months in stainless steel before release. And you can imagine buying 5,000 pounds of cherries is a financial commitment burden.
Yes.
So we needed to kind of get the farm kind of up and going before we can commit to
I should think so.
buying fruit like that.
That may require another bank loan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Not as much as the currants, but,
Yeah.
but
On
close.
that note, let's talk about currants.
Yes. Let's talk about currants. It's very exciting.
So you want to tell the story?
Well, I mean, if you haven't heard the story of Greg Quinn and the mighty currants, we really wanted to do something that was hyper local. Well, I mean, currants basically are the currants that we distill are grown about 10 minutes away from our own farm, grown by Greg Quinn of Currant C, who was essentially single-handedly responsible in getting the ban on currants overturned in 2003. So there had been a ban in place for about a century. They were supposedly a co-vector for a rust that impacted white pine during the shipping industry's heyday, and they were using white pines for masts. And so anyway, Greg is a fascinating human, and obviously we were very taken with him and his fruit. And Kevin decided that we somehow had some money stashed away that I didn't know about, and he was going to invest in this like passion fruit project called Blackcurrant. So you can take it from here.
Mr. Quinn was, as my research, if I recall correctly, Mr. Quinn is a noted children's book author.
Yes,
Correct.
He is. He's
better known for that than
fascinating.
Yeah.
But he was also the on the staff of the botanical gardens in
In the Bronx.
in the Bronx.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Bronx. He was a lecturer at the botanical gardens, or he taught there, I think. Yeah. So
We should bring him here.
You
to
should.
somebody's show.
Oh.
Maybe not mine, but somebody's show.
He's done a show.
He's done a show.
Yeah.
Forget about it.
he's
So
fascinating.
fascinating.
So he was. We talked to him, and I thought, this is amazing. No one's making a black currant in the United States. It's very common in Poland. It's very common in Austria. It's common
yeah.
in England.
Germany.
Germany.
Oh,
But you don't see it here. And part of the reason why you don't see it here is because the fruit in fermentation can go towards the methanol direction in
yeah.
distillation. So if the government, if the TTB is
And
analyzing...
and methanol, for those who don't know, is the bad alcohol.
Correct. So if the TTB is going to analyze a distillate coming into the United States, they may reject it because the methanol is too high. Okay, that's why you don't see them that often. But also the fruit's expensive. So, yeah, so he got the ban overturned.
Which is why we don't see it in the markets.
Correct.
I mean,
Yeah.
why don't we see in markets here if it is grown even in small quantities in the farmers markets? It's not a thing here in this country.
Correct.
People don't know what to do with it.
Right.
Right.
But it's been so fascinating. The people that are either European or have European heritage that like say, oh, blackcurrant, and the memories that are associated with that flavor.
Oh,
It's fascinating. And it's also, I'd say, what's the name of the distillery in England that does Cap? There's this really interesting distillery in the UK that basically, I think, got it spot on in saying that blackcurrant is like the fruit when you distill that most expresses the entire plant. And I really get that. We only distill the berries, but the profile of blackcurrant definitely encompasses like a green, a eucalyptus menthol kind of like
Leafy.
yes, it's a plant kind of
But
experience.
also the earthy, rooty side of it. It's the
brambly.
whole thing, you know?
It's kind of like rolling in a briar patch. It's
Yeah.
just very, yeah. And so it's more, I'd say, of our head scratchy kind of, you take it home and you sit with it. It's not like the pear brandy. It is a different beast. And it's the one that Kevin gravitates towards most nights.
so let's talk about how you made this. And mind you, this is it's an amazingly great drink. It's bloody expensive as well. It should be considering what it takes to make it.
Correct. So currants are very low in fructose. So so the potential alcohol is around 6% or so. It's not a lot. 6-7% would be optimal. Okay. So this took us about 3 weeks to start the fermentation. It took another 4 to 5 weeks to finish the fermentation. And then once we put it in the distillery, this is a little leg up that we have because of Hans Reisebauer. He developed a patent on a distillery to have a second reflux helmet. So you have the pot, you have the helmet with the defleglimator in that helmet, and you have another reflux helmet to the side with the second defleglimator there. So there's basically two
This sounds like Back to the
pre-condensers.
Future.
For
Come on,
for those of you who are lost at this point,
including
Kevin
myself.
is talking distiller language. It's a very specific language. You can just kind of tune out for just a moment. Continue, Kevin.
Exactly.
So the point is that there's basically two pre-condensers before the condenser, okay? And so what that does is I can open a channel that allows the alcohol to go through both helmets, and it allows me to get about 1.5 to 2% more alcohol, even with a low fructose fruit, and still get the high alcohol that I'm looking for, as opposed to having the first defleglimator knock down the alcohol, enrich the pot, and evaporate again. You're getting it out of two helmets at the same time. I know that's kind of complicated, but it's a patent.
I live with him. I still don't understand it.
Yeah.
Just so everyone understands. Yeah.
So it's a patent. We're the only distillery in the United States that has this. and it allows us to do really low fructose fruits like black currants, but also it's important for raspberries.
Raspberries,
So I really
yeah.
hope to do raspberries someday. Raspberries are almost as
I can't
expensive as black currants, so it's kind of
There's certainly a connection here in terms aromatically speaking, from a hedonistic perspective, between what you've got going on here in black currants and and raspberry distillates, better ones that I've tried in my life. There's a high tone. I don't know. A better word to describe it is a high tone
yeah.
nature to of these things that it's like walking a tightrope in terms of what's appearing on my palate. I've had horrible raspberry distillates in my life. I've also had extremely fine ones. This black currant version of yours resembles the best of the raspberry ones I've ever tasted. It maintains this delicate balance on my palate and my sense of smell that is difficult to achieve. And congratulations on that.
thank you.
Good job, baby. Thank
So
you, David.
we're going to use it again because right now we're fermenting cranberries. So
Oh,
Oh my God.
Thanksgiving!
a seasonal plug.
So I decided that no one's making an eau de vie from cranberry. We should try to make it.
Not even in Maine.
No, not that. I've never seen one. If
Well,
I visited the kind folks at Split Rock. Great guys up there. They're not working with cranberries. They do great things with blueberry,
yeah.
Ooh.
and horseradish,
Yeah.
but not with. Yes, they do a great horseradish.
Really?
Vodka. Yeah, but nothing with cranberries that I'm aware of.
Yeah, so we found that the only cranberry bog in New York is basically you drive north to Montreal and then go west for another hour.
Back to New
So
York.
it's like 5 hours. So Fix Brothers, as I said, they've become friends and family to us. And we had a lot of pairs from them. I said, can I please use your bins to drive up north 5 hours, pick up cranberries and drive back south again? They said yes. So one Sunday I left early in the morning.
Yeah.
Took 6 bins up, got 5,000 pounds of cranberries, brought them back, and they've been fermenting since October 3rd, and they're not done. And it's November
They're
17th.
happy little berries.
Yeah. So the challenge of cranberry is that the pH is really low. So the pH of a cranberry when I took it was
If anybody's bitten into a fresh cranberry,
Yeah.
you're probably wincing at
Yes,
that
the
comment.
thought of it.
exactly. So it was like 2.1. And 2.1 pH is too low for yeast to do fermentation. So the answer to that is add a little bit of water. And what I didn't really think about was that how do you harvest cranberries? Well, you flood it and then they float. So I added water and all the cranberries were floating. Totally didn't work. So then I had to pull everything out of the tank and like crush them and then pump them back into the tank. And so it's still an experiment, but I'll use this second reflux helmet when I do that because they're low in fructose.
But and Matt wants to jump in, but I need to say a word for the relatively uneducated listener to this. For those of you who are thinking that, well, why don't they just add some sugar to get the alcohol, get the fermentation going, and boost the alcohol? That's not done here. That's not the kind of thing that craft distillers do, that Kevin and Robin do there at Branchwater Farms. So you find that generally speaking, but not always in the craft distilling world, there is no sugar. So the hard work he's talking about is for real.
Correct. Yeah.
They're not ocean spray.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving is next week. What?
It won't be ready.
Thanksgiving 2020.
So the black
I'm gonna be getting
currants-
this.
the black
You're
currant
really
took,
slow acting yeast there, don't you?
yeah. The black currant took 12 months in stainless steel before we could release it. It took that long to open up, and I think if the cranberry acts like the black currant, it's going to take a similar amount of time. Sure. I don't know. Once we distill it, we'll find out. But every morning when I go in to mix the tanks, it just smells amazing. It's just all.
It's going to be the thing that we just ferment for 5 years, and
Yeah.
people come to visit us. It's a museum of the cranberry. I mean,
Well said. Yeah. Well said. So Matt, please pour the apple, and then because we got to start talking about whiskeys.
Yep.
And I think we're going to bleed over on the time. So please talk about your venture into whiskeys.
So gin was the first thing we released because we needed a clear spirit on the market, and we
course.
don't like vodka, and we don't have a distillery that can make vodka really. So you need the best vodka is made on a column still. We have pot stills, so it was easier for us to use gin, and we both like gin. So that's why we went in the gin direction. But we also know that brown spirits are really where what people are looking for.
and we love.
We love brown spirits.
So-
So we've always planted wheat and rye. We're going to taste today the wheat that is a byproduct of the gin. So basically the wheat whiskey is made because we produce a lot of clear wheat whiskey. We dilute that down, like I said before, to add the botanicals for the gin run, the third run for the gin. And once we run out of botanicals, whatever's left over, we put into oak barrels. But our main brown spirit for grain is rye. And I brought a little bit, a cast sample of that.
Great. So a little bit of history. We touched upon it earlier. Didn't dive into it. What's the connection, the Hudson Valley with rye, both past and current, and then your work with it in fashioning your whiskey? So provide a little bit of background for the uninitiated. Could.
That's a great question, and I think you can answer it better than I can.
Yeah. Flip the
I'm far more comfortable being the host than I am being the expert. But for those of you unfamiliar with the history of New York rye whiskeys, it is considerable. Goes back to, oh my gosh, probably the 1700s.
Exactly.
And there's an organization, go look on empirerye.com. It's a group of New York distilleries who are focused upon making their rye-based whiskeys from 100% rye culled from New York rye grains. I don't think you're a member.
No.
No, we're
At
not.
this point.
Because, well, we don't qualify.
Oh.
Because we distill above 160 proof.
Oh, well, never mind.
So what the New York rye whiskey has done is they followed the TTB guidelines on rye whiskey, which is to distill below 160 proof and go into barrel at 62.5% alcohol.
But why do we distill above
And we don't
160?
do that. We go above.
So this begs another question that Robin was kind of,
Yeah.
in a sense, nudging him to. Please continue on about that.
So we distill everything above 160 proof. And the point of that is that we don't want to distill the tail. The tail is what gives you all the kind of coarseness and bitterness in your throat that you then need to use barrel aging to resolve to make it smooth to drink. And our philosophy is just make high quality alcohol even though it's a lower volume. So we could double our volume if we distilled more of the tail. What we want to do is just distill really high quality and then let the barrel do. We don't need it in barrel that long is the point.
But you were giving a history of rye in New York.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm just the moderator. I'm not the expert here. Though I did write a very extensive article.
Yes,
this Distiller magazine on the same subject. I'm not going to go into it. Empire Rye, unfortunately, in my opinion, is a organization that is in great need of updating. Let's leave it at that. In many ways, yours is maybe the most recent updated need. So we've just tasted your apple brandy, which is on the brown side. It's on the brown side because
It's aged in oak.
that makes sense. How long was it aged in oak, and what type of oak, and how does that impact the flavor and smell of the pure apple distillate?
So it was 1 year in new American oak, 1 year in used Chardonnay barrels, and then we blended those barrels, and then 6 months in steel before we bottled it. And we bottled 2/3 of it. The last third we blended back in. So this is from the 2020 harvest. And we blended the last third into the 21 harvest and the 22 harvest. And then now we've now blended all of them into two 500-liter barrels, used cider barrels. And we'll use it as a Solera going forward. So every year we'll take a little bit out to bottle, and every year we'll add a little bit more in for aging.
That's a very clever way to adapt.
I just want to
Yeah.
keep adding to the old material, you know?
Why not? You have a living history then.
Yeah.
Of what you're doing. We've moved on. Matt had just poured your rye whiskey.
Wheat.
What? Wheat whiskey.
Yep.
Tell us a bit about that.
So this is 100% wheat grown on the farm, and it is,
Kind of the orphan.
yeah, it's kind of the orphan. So this was 1 year in new oak barrels, and then it was 6 months in Pinot Noir barrels that we got from Raj Par from Sandhi Winery out in California. He's also an organic and now biodynamic grower. We also have Mayacamas barrels at the farm, used Mayacamas barrels at the farm. So we're trying to use our finishing barrels from wineries that also farm in a similar way that we do, either with organic, biodynamic principles, regenerative principles, etc.
Keep it in the family. This has got a really kind of nice, even though the rye character comes out immediately on the palate, on the finish, you get the softness from, I would think, the red wine Pinot Noir barrels.
Yeah.
That kind of soften it up so it's not as bracing at the end as many New York State rye whiskeys can be.
This is the wheat, though.
And it's equally delicious, by the way.
It-
And surprising.
Here's the rye, if you're ready for the rye.
It kind of did remind me of the rye, though.
Yeah.
Was it the rye?
No, it was the wheat.
Yeah, but the wheat is basically, I say the orphan because it's what we don't use in the gin. So every time Kevin does like 1,800 liter batches that are the botanicals are pre-batched per 1,800 liters. And so every time he does a batch of wheat, there's a little bit of orphaned amount. And that goes into a barrel and gets forgotten. So basically this was a run of 550 bottles.
Wow.
The wheat whiskey. Yeah.
Oh, is it for sale at the moment?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is. And then the rye will be our main whiskey, which will be released early spring.
Fantastic. And I recall from my earlier talks with you that you were available in 7 states, including New York. Has that increased?
It's New York, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona,
Connecticut,
Mississippi, Louisiana, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania.
That makes 10.
Yeah.
Well, I have clients in New Mexico and Louisiana. I will be alerting them to your availability because these are the kind of people who would love to taste what you're doing there.
Wonderful.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for that. So Matt has come back with more bottles. He's shared with
Matt's
the crowd.
back.
So there's a crowd back here in the Epicurean that's been enjoying both the cocktails that Matt's been mixing up and the straight tastes from the bottles here. Matt, if you can just give a little bit of a feedback, how have people been responding so far to they've been tasting?
They've been liking it a lot, actually. They, as you expected, the black currant. They're like, I don't taste black currant, but they were enjoying it very much.
Head scratchy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
As you described. Yeah, everyone loved it. And the wheat, which I don't know if you've discussed a lot here because I had to step away.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone loved that too.
Oh, good.
And so far, everything's been well received.
Great.
We got our whiskey aficionado Martin out there putting his nose to the glass on all that. So Martin's got some. I'm sure he'll have some comments, especially when he tastes this rye that we're about to go into now. So the rye whiskey here, we've just been talking about New York State rye. A bit about yours.
It's kind of atypical.
It's not as grassy as most people's ryes are. I think that's also because we distill above 160 proof. It's aged in new American oak char 3 and 4 barrels. We will age it for 2 years before we release it. So right now, most of the barrels are around 1 year and 11 months. So it'll come out in the springtime. But the plan for this is that we have some 1,200 liter 70-year-old Riesling casks coming over from Germany, and we will move the small casks, the small barrels, the new oak, decant those into the big 1,200 liter barrels, and we'll make that a Solera for the rye going forward. So
are you going to apply that same process of the newer barrels and then into the old one like that?
Correct.
Wow, that's like pulling things from completely different angles and trying to make a
I really like the big oak. I'm learning from the apple especially. I'm learning that the larger the oak vessel, the more harmonious the spirit ultimately is. And this, people that age in 30-liter barrels and the small ones, I don't understand that so much. Everything is done 200-liter barrels, which is normal. But if I can get anything bigger, I want something bigger because it just makes for it's a different mouthfeel. It's a different expression. It's a different harmonious style. It's a different whiskey, and that's what we're looking for.
I agree. It's far more outside the norm that I discover a craft distillery that makes a drinkable product out of a very small barrel. It's either luck or somebody who's extremely skillful when that happens. But it's a rare occurrence. I'm a big fan of bigger barrels and older ones too, if you can manage the good ones. Yeah. So, can you share what's in store for Branchwater Farms in 2024 and beyond? What new releases might you have? Why should people be dropping in? Any events going on?
So we do have a holiday craft market coming up on December 9th. So we'll have people
super crafty people presenting their wares. Yeah, December 9th. That's one of the things for the store that I want to eventually expand on the crafty side, because I've encountered so many people that have talent, passion, and soaps, quilts. It's kind of mind-boggling what you encounter here. But yeah, so the holiday market's kind of a showcase for that. And then we also have our rye release coming up in the spring, in which we will invite, we have our neighbor Slow Fox Farm. They are a brewery. And then hopefully Sparrow Bush, we were talking to them, and Stuart at Hudson Valley Hops and Grains about kind of just when we release something, we want it to be like a broader subject.
Community. Yeah.
And not just the spirit, but like when we did our Black Currant, we had Currant Cassis, we had Greg Quinn from Currant C, and it's kind of like the focus is the currant, and then we happen to make a spirit from that. Same with rye. So rye is a pretty amazing thing, and you can make bread, you can make beer, you can make different things from it. So
and we released the apple brandy. We had Rose Hill Farm come. We had Montgomery Place Orchards come.
Dan Pucci,
who co-authored the book, the American Cider, come. So, we try to make it a community event when we release a new spirit, because it's not made in isolation. It's not made in a vacuum. It's made in a community. We want to support other people that are also doing something with whatever that ingredient or
we're all about collaboration.
Fruit happens to be. Yeah.
Terrific. And then lastly, I've got to say, for those people who want to come visit and or purchase, do check out their website, branchwaterfarms.com.
And we love visitors.
And look at my article about Branchwater Farms at distilling.com. Robin, Kevin, is there anything else you'd like to add that maybe we've missed in this delicious discussion here at Drinking on the Edge?
The only thing I would add maybe is that I think our focus really is the spirits are what is the economical
add on
to an environmental project, which is I think where our heart is. We don't want to be big. We don't want to blow this up into something that is a commercial
success
so type of thing. We're interested in making.
You want to stay poor.
No,
right.
We don't want to stay poor, but we want to create handcrafted things of extremely high quality that allows us to conserve the land that we live on. And we want to be able to pass the land on to somebody else that can also have a viable business without it being developed. So we're now talking about, conservation easements and how do we protect the land and
a 300-year plan for the farm. Like we want to.
You're thinking ahead.
We have a slice of land that is not ours, basically, that we have to steward through difficult times, into whatever lies ahead, and we want to keep it viable, but we're not looking to extract the maximum, and we're not looking at the American model of success with our farm.
Right. We would never put a third of our acreage into fallow land for a year if we were looking for that economic success like that.
Got it.
If we wanted to blow it up, we would plant every year. We would cut down trees and plant more. And we're not. That's not our goal.
Well, your commitment to your ethics regarding the land is reflected clearly in the quality of the spirits that you've made here, both enjoyed as they are and then mixed by Matt. I've been a fan since I met you, and since I visited you. Excuse me, we met long ago. But since I visited you and tasted what you're doing, the project that Robin and Kevin are working on and making their life's work at Branchwater Farms needs to be needs to enjoy your attention. Please go visit them at branchwaterfarms.com, and they're in Milan, New York. Robin Touchet, Kevin Pike, thank you for joining Drinking on the Edge.
Thank you,
Thank you for
David.
joining us.
Really, thank you.